It was a cool evening in Atlanta, and the city lights sparkled like stars. Inside one of the grandest hotels, a charity gala was being held in a golden ballroom. The hall was full of rich people dressed in shiny suits and expensive gowns. Soft music played in the background while glasses clinked, and polite laughter filled the air. It was a place where the powerful came to show their wealth and feel good about giving to charity. Among the guests was Richard Langston, a man known not only for his millions but also for his pride. He had made his money in tech and liked to remind people of it. With slicked-back hair, a silver watch, and a sharp tuxedo, Richard looked like success itself, but behind his charming smile was someone who looked down on people he thought were beneath him. He walked around the room, shaking hands, telling jokes, and making sure everyone noticed him. When he spoke, others listened even if they didn't want to. Because Richard had influence and power, he talked loudly about his latest company deal and laughed at his own jokes louder than anyone else. But no one dared to tell him he was rude because they didn't want to lose his favor. Across the room, working quietly and carefully, was a young black woman named Maya. She wore a neat black uniform with white gloves and carried a silver tray of drinks. Maya was one of the waitresses hired for the event. She moved with grace, her steps smooth like water, and her eyes focused and calm. Most guests didn't notice her after all. She was just staff to them. But Maya had a story of her own, one that no one in that ballroom could guess years ago. Maya had been a dancer. Not just any dancer, but a very talented one. She had trained in ballet and modern dance since she was a little girl. She dreamed of dancing on big stages and touring the world. But life had other plans when her mother got sick. Maya had to stop dancing and take care of her. She worked long hours and took whatever job she could to help pay the bills. Dance became a memory, hidden in her heart like an old photograph. Now she worked events like this one, staying quiet, staying invisible. That night, Maya watched the rich guests smile and joke. She didn't hate them, but she couldn't help noticing how different their lives were from hers. She stayed polite, professional, and silent. Just as she was trained to be, she didn't expect anything unusual to happen. But life, as always, had surprises waiting. Richard Langston sat at a table with his rich friends, drinking wine and bragging about his dance skills. He claimed he could outdance anyone in the room, even professionals. His friends laughed, not because he was funny, but because they wanted to stay on his good side. Richard loved attention and he was bored, so he looked around the room for something, or someone, to entertain him. That's when he saw Maya standing nearby with her tray. He pointed at her and said loudly, "Hey, you look like you've got rhythm. Why don't you show us a move or two?" The room went quiet for a moment. Unsure if he was joking or serious, Maya froze, unsure what to say. She wasn't there to dance, she was there to work. But Richard didn't stop there. He smirked and added, "Tell you what, if you dance right now, I'll give you $100 tip." His friends chuckled again, and some people started watching, curious to them. It was just a bit of fun, a powerful man teasing a waitress. But to Maya, it felt different. She looked at Richard, then at the eyes now turned toward her. Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. She could walk away, ignore the dare, and keep her pride, but then again, maybe this was her moment. Maybe life was giving her a strange and unexpected chance to remind herself, and everyone else, of who she really was. She slowly put her tray down, her hands steady, her back straight. A soft hush fell over the room. No one expected her to accept the dare. And yet Maya took a deep breath, stepped forward, and said, "All right, I'll dance." It was a cool evening in Atlanta, and the city lights sparkled like stars. Inside one of the grandest hotels, a charity gala was being held in a golden ballroom. The hall was full of rich people dressed in shiny suits and expensive gowns. Soft music played in the background while glasses clinked, and polite laughter filled the air. It was a place where the powerful came to show their wealth and feel good about giving to charity. Among the guests was Richard Langston, a man known not only for his millions but also for his pride. He had made his money in tech and liked to remind people of it. With slicked-back hair, a silver watch, and a sharp tuxedo, Richard looked like success itself. But behind his charming smile was someone who looked down on people he thought were beneath him. He walked around the room, shaking hands, telling jokes, and making sure everyone noticed him. When he spoke, others listened, even if they didn't want to. Because Richard had influence and power, he talked loudly about his latest company deal and laughed at his own jokes louder than anyone else. But no one dared to tell him he was rude because they didn't want to lose his favor. Across the room, working quietly and carefully, was a young black woman named Maya. She wore a neat black uniform with white gloves and carried a silver tray of drinks. Maya was one of the waitresses hired for the event. She moved with grace, her steps smooth like water, and her eyes focused and calm. Most guests didn't notice her after all. She was just staff to them. But Maya had a story of her own, one that no one in that ballroom could guess years ago. Maya had been a dancer. Not just any dancer, but a very talented one. She had trained in ballet and modern dance since she was a little girl. She dreamed of dancing on big stages and touring the world. But life had other plans when her mother got sick. Maya had to stop dancing and take care of her. She worked long hours and took whatever job she could to help pay the bills. Dance became a memory, hidden in her heart like an old photograph. Now she worked events like this one, staying quiet, staying invisible. That night, Maya watched the rich guests smile and joke. She didn't hate them. But she couldn't help noticing how different their lives were from hers. She stayed polite, professional, and silent. Just as she was trained to be, she didn't expect anything unusual to happen. But life, as always, had surprises waiting. Richard Langston sat at a table with his rich friends, drinking wine and bragging about his dance skills. He claimed he could outdance anyone in the room, even professionals. His friends laughed, not because he was funny, but because they wanted to stay on his good side. Richard loved attention and he was bored, so he looked around the room for something, or someone, to entertain him. That's when he saw Maya standing nearby with her tray. He pointed at her and said loudly, "Hey, you look like you've got rhythm. Why don't you show us a move or two?" The room went quiet for a moment. Unsure if he was joking or serious, Maya froze, unsure what to say. She wasn't there to dance, she was there to work. But Richard didn't stop there. He smirked and added, "Tell you what, if you dance right now, I'll give you $100 tip." His friends chuckled again, and some people started watching, curious to them. It was just a bit of fun, a powerful man teasing a waitress. But to Maya, it felt different. She looked at Richard, then at the eyes now turned toward her. Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. She could walk away, ignore the dare, and keep her pride, but then again, maybe this was her moment. Maybe life was giving her a strange and unexpected chance to remind herself, and everyone else, of who she really was. She slowly put her tray down, her hands steady, her back straight. A soft hush fell over the room. No one expected her to accept the dare, and yet Maya took a deep breath, stepped forward, and said, "All right, I'll dance." The ballroom still buzzed with energy long after Maya's dance had ended. Guests whispered and murmured to each other, replaying the scene in their minds. Some were amazed at her skill, others embarrassed that they had laughed before. But one thing was clear to everyone. Something special had just happened in that room. Maya, however, went back to her work quietly. She collected empty glasses from tables, refilled drinks, and offered polite smiles. Her hands were steady, but her heart was still beating fast from the performance. She tried to calm herself, but she could feel dozens of eyes on her. It was as if she had stepped out of the shadows and now couldn't hide again. On the far side of the room, Richard Langston sat back in his chair. His fingers tapped on the table, his drink untouched. The laughter that had once surrounded him was gone. Even his friends were silent, glancing at him but not daring to speak. Richard wasn't used to being embarrassed. He was the man who always had the upper hand, the loudest voice, the biggest wallet. But now, in front of his own crowd, a waitress had silenced him, not with words, but with grace. The image of her spinning across the floor replayed in his head like a loop. He hated feeling small, yet he couldn't deny what he had seen. One of his friends leaned in and whispered, "She's incredible, isn't she?" Richard gave a short, sharp laugh. "Yeah, I didn't expect that," he muttered. But inside he felt something else, curiosity. He had dared her as a joke, a way to show his power. Instead, she had shown him something that money couldn't buy. Meanwhile, other guests were already sharing the video on social media. Phones buzzed, hashtags popped up, and comments poured in. "Who is this waitress?" People asked online. The clip showed her dancing barefoot, glowing under the lights, while a stunned crowd looked on. In less than an hour, the video had thousands of views and was climbing higher. Maya had no idea about any of this. She was too busy making sure the tables stayed clean and the guests had what they needed. But she could feel the shift in the air. People who hadn't spoken to her all night were now trying to catch her eye. Some smiled at her, some whispered kind words. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. As she passed by Richard's table again, their eyes met. It wasn't the same as before. Before, he had looked at her like she was a servant, a joke. Now his gaze held something else, respect, maybe even regret. Richard cleared his throat and spoke. His voice quieter now. You've trained, haven't you?" Maya paused, balancing her tray. "I used to," she said softly. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were firm. She didn't owe him an explanation. But she gave him that much. Richard nodded slowly, looking down at his glass for the first time that night. He didn't know what to say. All the money, all the charm, none of it worked here. This wasn't his world. It was hers. At another table, a woman in a blue dress was typing furiously on her phone. She was a local event manager who often hired talent for shows. She had seen hundreds of performers in her career. But something about Maya's dance had struck her deeply. She saved the video to send to a producer friend later. She had a feeling this young woman's life was about to change. Back near the bar, two waiters whispered to each other. "Did you see her?" "She's amazing." One said, "I work with her every weekend." "She never talks about it," the other replied. They both smiled, proud to know her. Maya had just given hope to more people than she realized. As the night went on, the mood of the gala changed. The band played livelier music. Conversations became softer. Even the charity donations increased as guests felt inspired. It was as if Maya's dance had reminded everyone why they were there, to make a difference. Maya kept her focus, but inside she felt a strange glow. It wasn't just about the applause or the stares. It was about reclaiming a piece of herself. For so long she had believed her dreams were over, but now for the first time she wondered if maybe they weren't. Richard watched her leave the ballroom at the end of her shift. He didn't call after her, didn't try to stop her. But something in him had shifted too. He had built his life on control, but tonight he had been taught a quiet lesson, and outside, under the cool Atlanta night sky, Maya stood for a moment before heading to the bus stop. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She didn't know that her phone in her bag was already lighting up with messages. She didn't know that people online were calling her the Barefoot Star. She didn't know that her next chapter had already begun. But she felt it deep inside, a stirring, a pull. She had been dared to dance and had accepted. Now the world, without her planning it, was daring her again to rise, to return, to become who she was meant to be. Maya walked back to the side of the ballroom, her shoes in one hand, her tray in the other. She moved quietly, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just lit up the room with a single dance. But the crowd wasn't ready to return to normal. People were still whispering, still watching her from the corners of their eyes. Some clapped again. Unsure if they had shown enough appreciation the first time, others shook their heads, wondering how they could have ever looked past her in the first place. One man near the buffet nudged his wife and said, "I thought she was just a server," his wife replied. "She's something else, isn't she?" Even the staff whispered behind the curtain where the food was being prepared. "She really danced out there," said one, eyes wide. "She didn't just dance," said another. "She owned the room." But Maya didn't show any sign of pride. She returned to her job, offering drinks with a calm smile and refilling glasses without missing a beat. Inside, though, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of joy. It wasn't about the clapping or the attention. It was the feeling of doing what she was born to do, even if only for a moment. Back at his table, Richard sat silently. He didn't laugh, didn't joke, didn't even look at his friends for the first time that night. His voice was missing from the room. He stared at his wine glass, swirling it slowly, thinking about what had just happened. He had dared her to dance as a joke. He expected her to say no, to blush, to walk away. Instead, she stood tall, accepted the challenge, and turned the night upside down. She had reminded him, and everyone else, what true talent looked like. And worst of all for him, she had done it without needing anything from him. He had tried to buy her moment with money, but Maya had danced for something deeper, something he couldn't touch. A young woman in a green dress walked over to Maya. Holding her phone, "Excuse me," she said shyly. "That was amazing, really. Do you mind if I post this video?" Maya blinked. "Video?" The woman smiled. "Yeah, someone recorded your dance. It's already going viral." Maya felt her stomach twist, not from fear but surprise. She hadn't danced for attention. She had danced to remember who she was. Now the world outside the ballroom might see it too. "I don't mind," she said softly. The woman grinned and ran back to her table. Already typing a caption elsewhere in the ballroom, a man in a gray blazer was speaking to his assistant. He was a talent scout for a local performing arts company. "I want her name," he said. "Find out who she is, and get her number before she leaves." Even the hotel manager, who had been standing near the entrance, was watching Maya now. She had been hired as part of a temporary service team, but now she was the name on everyone's lips. He made a mental note to ask the agency about her later, but Maya, unaware of these conversations, continued working. She stayed quiet, though her fingers trembled just a little when she picked up glasses. A part of her still couldn't believe she had actually done it. Danced in front of strangers, under pressure, and let her real self come forward. The music from the band picked up again, livelier now. It was as if the room had taken on a new mood, lighter and more open. Several guests got up to dance. Inspired by what they had seen, some moved awkwardly, others with joy. But no one dared compare themselves to the woman who had gone first. Richard finally stood up and walked toward the bar. As he passed Maya, he slowed for just a moment. Their eyes met again. This time he didn't smirk or offer money. He simply nodded, a small gesture of respect, and walked away. Maya didn't nod back, but she noticed it. She didn't need anything from him. Not his money, not his approval. She had already taken back something far more valuable. Her own voice. One of the older guests, a retired ballet teacher named Mrs. Lowell, had tears in her eyes. She had seen many dancers in her time, but there was something in Maya's movement that touched her. It wasn't just the steps, she whispered to her friend. It was the story in her body. As the gala neared its end, guests began to leave. Some stopped to thank Maya. Some handed her business cards. Some just smiled. She took it all with quiet grace, unsure what would come of it. But deep down, a door had opened, and she knew it couldn't be shut again, outside. As she waited for her ride under the soft night sky, Maya breathed in the cool air. Her phone buzzed in her pocket with messages from friends who had seen the video. People she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. The world was changing slowly, and she was standing in the middle of it. Barefoot and brave, tonight Maya had danced once, but it had echoed far beyond the ballroom walls. And even though she didn't know what would happen next, she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The next morning, sunlight poured into Maya's small apartment through the thin curtains. She sat at the edge of her bed, phone in hand, blinking at the screen in disbelief. Overnight, her life had changed. Though her room looked exactly the same, the video of her dance had gone viral, truly viral. There were hundreds of messages, most from strangers. Some praised her talent. Others asked where she had trained. A few offered jobs or auditions. She even saw a message from a television producer asking if she'd appear on a talk show. Maya stared at it all with wide eyes. She hadn't danced to be famous, hadn't planned to be seen. Yet now the whole world seemed to be watching. It was exciting, but also scary. She was still the same woman who cleaned tables and poured wine the night before. Her phone buzzed again with another message. It was from her best friend, Tanya, who lived in another city. "Girl, you are everywhere. My coworkers just watched your video at lunch." Maya smiled, her heart warm. She hadn't spoken to Tanya in weeks, and now her dance had brought them back together. She got dressed in simple jeans and a plain sweater and walked to the cafe down the street. She needed time to think, to breathe. The world felt different now, and she didn't know what to do next. Inside the cafe, she ordered her usual tea and sat by the window. She looked outside, watching people pass by, wondering how many of them had seen her face online. She never imagined a single dance could travel so far. As she sipped her tea, her thoughts drifted back to the gala. The looks on people's faces, the silence before the applause, and Richard Langston, his challenge. His smirk, his silence afterward. She wondered what he thought now. Had he learned anything, or was he just embarrassed? Maya didn't feel angry at him anymore. He had given her the dare. But she had chosen to rise. It was her choice, her strength and her moment. He had expected a joke, but she had given a performance meanwhile. In a large glass office building across the city, Richard Langston sat at his desk. His assistant stood nervously beside him, holding a tablet. "Sir, you're trending again," she said quietly. Richard sighed, rubbing his forehead. He knew what was coming. He watched the video again. There he was, making the dare, his voice loud and full of pride. And then Maya, calm, elegant, powerful. The comments beneath the video were full of praise for her and criticism for him. "Arrogant millionaire humbled," one comment said. "She danced with grace while he acted like a fool," said another. There were thousands more. Richard wasn't used to being the villain in the story. He didn't like it, but he couldn't deny the truth. "She's got real talent," he muttered. His assistant looked surprised. "Yes, sir, I agree," he nodded slowly. "Find out who she is." "For what?" she asked. Richard stared out the window, his face thoughtful. "I'm not sure yet," he replied. Back at the cafe, Maya's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello, is this Maya?" A warm voice asked. "This is Claire from the Atlanta Arts Foundation." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "I saw your video last night, and I wanted to talk about a possible scholarship, or even a performance slot at our summer event." Maya felt her hands tremble. She pressed the phone closer, her voice soft but steady. "Are you serious?" "Very," Claire replied. "You're the kind of dancer who moves people, not just with steps, but with story." They talked for 10 minutes, but it felt like a dream. When the call ended, Maya sat still. Holding the phone tightly, doors were opening, and this time, she was ready to walk through them. She returned home and stood in front of the mirror. For years, she had looked in that mirror and seen a tired server. Today, she saw a dancer, not just because the world saw her, but because she finally saw herself again that night. She pulled out an old box from under her bed. Inside were worn dance shoes, faded programs, and old photos from recitals. She picked up the shoes and slipped them on. They still fit. She moved to the center of the room and stretched her arms. Her body remembered every twist, every turn. Her soul remembered too. Maya danced under the soft glow of her bedroom lamp. No audience, no cameras, no applause. Only her breath, her heartbeat, and the sound of bare feet moving across the floor. This was her truth, her gift, her calling. The world might offer stages and lights, but Maya knew that the real magic had always lived inside her, and now she was finally ready to let it shine. Richard Langston stood by the tall windows of his office. Outside, the city moved like always, cars, people and noise, but inside Richard felt strangely still. The video of the gala had reached over 3 million views. News outlets had picked it up, calling it a moment of magic at a millionaire's ball. His face appeared in every clip, but he wasn't the star. Maya was. People praised her strength, her elegance, and her control. They also criticized Richard's behavior. Words like arrogant, entitled, and out of touch followed his name online. At first, he wanted to ignore it. He had been mocked before, survived worse in business, but something about this moment stayed with him. He couldn't forget her face when she accepted the dare. Calm, fearless, and proud. He replayed the moment over and over again. How she had stepped onto the floor without fear. How she had danced like the room belonged to her. How she had walked away without taking the money. That part stung the most. It wasn't about the $100. He had spent more on wine that night. It was about dignity, about the way she had turned down something he thought everyone wanted. Richard had lived his life thinking money solved everything. If someone was unhappy, pay them. If someone was offended, tip them. But Maya had shown him that some things couldn't be bought. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. He typed in her name, Maya Johnson. The internet now knew who she was. He found a short interview she had done with a local podcast. She spoke gently, humbly, and with purpose. "I didn't dance for attention," she said. "I danced because I remembered who I was." Richard closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. The words stayed in his mind like a song on repeat. That afternoon, he made a phone call to his assistant. "I want to meet her," he said. His assistant hesitated. "Sir, I'm not sure she'll want to meet you." "I know," Richard replied, "but ask anyway." Meanwhile, Maya was finishing her shift at a local community dance center. Since the video, she had been invited to lead beginner classes. The pay wasn't much, but the smiles on the kids' faces were worth more than gold. She helped them stretch, taught them balance, and clapped loudly for every small step. She had almost forgotten about the email she got earlier, the one asking if she'd be willing to meet Richard Langston. At first, she wanted to delete it. Why should she give him more of her time? He had made her into a joke, even if things turned out differently. But another part of her wondered what he could possibly have to say. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was closure. So she replied saying yes, but only for a short coffee in a public place. The next day, they met at a quiet cafe not far from the hotel where the gala had taken place. Richard arrived first, dressed in a simple gray sweater instead of his usual expensive suit. He looked nervous, tapping his fingers on the table. When Maya walked in, he stood quickly and offered a polite nod. "Thanks for coming," he said. Maya sat down, her face calm but unreadable. "I don't have much time," she said. Richard nodded. "I understand," for a moment. Neither of them spoke, then he said quietly, "I want to apologize." Maya tilted her head. "Unsure where this was going, I was wrong," he continued. "I treated you like entertainment, not like a person." He paused, then added, "And you proved me wrong in front of everyone." Maya didn't smile, but she listened. It wasn't the apology that mattered. It was whether he meant it. "I thought money could buy anything," Richard said. "But you reminded me that respect, talent, and pride don't have a price." Maya finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I didn't dance for you," she said. "I danced for me." "I know," Richard replied. "And I'm glad you did." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I started a fund," he said, "for dancers from underprivileged backgrounds. It's named after my mother. She loved dance but never had the chance. It's not much yet, but I wanted to do something real." Maya looked at the envelope, then back at him. She could tell this wasn't about guilt or attention. This time it felt sincere. She nodded slowly. "If it helps someone find their voice, then it's worth it." Richard smiled just a little. It wasn't his usual smug grin. It was quiet, almost thankful. They didn't talk long after that. Just a few more words, a few shared memories of that strange, unforgettable night when Maya left. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Some stories don't end with fame or fortune. Some end with lessons learned and hearts changed. Maya didn't need Richard's praise or his money, but she accepted the fact that sometimes even the proud can learn grace. A few weeks had passed since the night of the gala. The buzz from the viral video had slowly settled, but the effect on Maya's life was still growing. Her days were now filled with dance, teaching at the community center, attending workshops, and even preparing for an upcoming performance. For the first time in years, her feet hurt from dancing, not from standing on shift. And that pain made her smile one morning. Maya received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from the Atlanta Arts Foundation. She had been chosen as one of 5 dancers to perform at the city's summer showcase. It wasn't just any event. It was the biggest art stage in the region, the kind of stage she used to dream about when she was a child. The letter also mentioned something else. The performance would be dedicated to celebrating untold stories. It felt right. After all, her dance had been just that, a story that no one saw coming. Maya began to practice every evening in the same small room where she once kept her dreams packed in a box. Now the box was open, old shoes, photos, and music sheets surrounded her. She danced for hours, perfecting each move. Each step was a memory, each stretch a promise to her younger self. One night after practice, she got a message from the gala organizer. They had decided to invite her back, this time as a guest, not staff. They wanted to honor her for the way she changed the tone of the event. Maya hesitated. She didn't need praise or a spotlight. But part of her knew that returning would be a full-circle moment. She said yes, and a week later, she stood outside the same golden ballroom. This time she wore a simple but elegant dress. Not a uniform, her hair was tied up neatly. Her face calm and confident. Inside, the lights still sparkled, the music still played. But now, she was walking through the doors with purpose. Not a tray, people recognized her right away. Some clapped softly as she entered. Others smiled and waved. Maya nodded politely, feeling both honored and a little overwhelmed. She took her seat near the front, surrounded by people who once looked past her. Now they leaned in to talk to her, to ask questions, to share compliments at the podium. The host spoke into the microphone. Tonight, we honor someone who reminded us that talent can come from anywhere, that strength can wear an apron, and that grace can silence a room. He looked toward Maya, who stood as the room applauded. She didn't speak, she just smiled, her eyes glowing with quiet pride. In the back of the room stood Richard Langston, watching the moment unfold. He didn't try to take credit, didn't step forward. He knew this night belonged to her and her alone. He clapped too, softer than the rest. But more sincere than before, after the event, Maya stepped outside into the warm night air. A few stars twinkled in the sky. Not as bright as the ballroom lights, but more peaceful. She leaned against the railing and looked out at the city. This place had once felt so big, so impossible now. It felt like it had opened its arms to her. Just then, a soft voice spoke behind her. "Big night?" It was Richard, dressed casually, his expression calm. "Yes," Maya replied, "a good one." He nodded, then said something she didn't expect. "You taught me more than anyone ever has." "You didn't even say much." Maya looked at him, her voice even. "I didn't need to," Richard smiled. "No, you didn't." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small card. On it was the name of the scholarship fund he had mentioned before, now officially launched. 4 dancers already signed up, he said. Maya took the card, holding it gently. "Good," she said. "They'll go far." There was no need for long speeches. Some stories ended not with fireworks, but with understanding. Maya turned back to the stars, feeling something settle in her chest, peace. She walked home that night with a quiet heart. Not because she had been clapped for, not because her name was known, but because she had turned pain into power. She had taken something meant to embarrass her and transformed it into a door not just for herself, but for others who had been unseen too long at home. She placed the scholarship card next to her old dance shoes. Beside it, she added a new item, a flyer for the summer showcase. She would perform again soon. Not as a waitress, not as a dare, but as Maya Johnson, the dancer who never gave up. And somewhere across town, a girl saw Maya's video online for the first time. She watched in awe, her eyes wide. Then she stood up, turned off the lights and began to dance. Because Maya's story was no longer just hers. It was a spark lighting new fires everywhere. Part 7 is now complete. Weeks turned into months and life kept moving. But the moment Maya danced barefoot in that golden ballroom continued to echo far beyond the hotel walls. People still shared the video online. Some watched it for inspiration, others to remind themselves that true beauty often comes quietly. Maya didn't chase fame, and she didn't try to stay in the spotlight. She focused on her dancing, her teaching, and building something lasting. The scholarship program Richard had started grew faster than anyone expected. With Maya's help, more young dancers from underrepresented communities applied. Some were beginners, some already trained, but all of them carried something powerful, a dream. One Saturday morning, Maya arrived early at the community center. The wooden floor smelled of polish, and the sun came through the tall windows. The room was empty for now, but not for long. In an hour, would be filled with young dancers laughing, stumbling, spinning, and trying again. This was her favorite time of day, the quiet before the magic. She walked to the front, took a deep breath, and stretched. Her muscles still ached from last night's rehearsal, but she welcomed the feeling. Each stretch was a reminder that her body was strong again, that her spirit had returned, A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was a young girl, maybe 12 years old, holding a printed flyer in her hand. Her name was Layla, and she had seen Maya's dance online more times than she could count. "I want to dance like you," she said. Her voice soft but serious. Maya smiled. "Then come in. Let's begin." In that moment, Maya realized something deeper. Her story was not just about rising, but about lifting. Every student she taught was part of something bigger, a ripple turning into a wave. Later that week, Maya stood backstage at the Atlanta Summer Showcase. She wore a white and gold costume, simple yet elegant. Her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with purpose. This would be her first time performing on a real stage in years. Not as a guest, not as staff, but as the headline act. The host's voice echoed through the curtains. "Please welcome Maya Johnson." The crowd clapped warmly. The lights dimmed and the music began. Maya stepped onto the stage with calm steps. Each movement came from somewhere deep inside her. She danced with grace but also with strength. She told a story, not of sadness but of rising through it. The crowd watched in complete silence. Even in a hall filled with hundreds of people, it felt as if she was dancing just for each of them. When she finished, there was a pause, and then an explosion of applause. People stood up, clapping with tears in their eyes. She bowed once deeply, then left the stage without needing a single word. Backstage, her phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations, praise, invitations. She put it aside and sat down, closing her eyes. She didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She was no longer the girl who had been dared to dance. She was the woman who chose to, across the city. Richard watched the live broadcast from his office. He smiled softly and shook his head. "She really did it," he whispered to himself. This time there was no regret, just respect. He had learned what money could never teach him. Some people don't need a stage to shine. They carry their light with them. Soon after the performance, Maya received an offer to tour with a national dance company. They had seen her story and wanted her not just as a dancer, but as a symbol. She thanked them but said she needed time. She had more to build in her own city first. She had students to train, a community to support, and a promise to keep to the girl she once was. A few months later, Maya opened her own small dance studio. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, painted in soft earth tones. With wide mirrors and wooden floors, the walls held framed photos of her dancing and little notes from her students. Above the door hung a small sign that read, "Dance with dignity." People from all over came to learn, not just how to move their feet, but how to believe in themselves. Maya taught more than dance steps. She taught how to stand tall after falling, how to be seen without shouting, and how to turn pain into power. And every so often, a new student would ask, "Miss Maya, is it true you were just a waitress when you went viral?" She would smile and say, "Yes, I was serving drinks, but that night I served a reminder." "A reminder of what?" They would ask. "That you never forget who you are. Even if others do." Maya's story continued, not just in videos or headlines, but in every young dancer who walked through her doors with hope, in every foot that touched the floor with quiet strength, and in every heart that learned to speak through movement. Because one night, long ago, a millionaire dared her to dance. But it was never really a dare. It was a calling, and she answered it. Not with words, not with anger, but with grace, rhythm, and truth. And the world finally listened.